Alright, so I'm back with another Road to 2200 rapid rating video, and in this game, I think this is game 12, I believe. So I had a 9 win, 2 loss, and 1 draw record going into this. So only 1 loss, and it was my previous game, and it was mainly due to time pressure at the end. But that was my first loss, and I was really looking to bounce back in this game. So I was playing an opponent rated 2173, and let's just jump right in. I have the black pieces in this game, so let's see what we have here. We have pawn to e4. I go c5. We have the Sicilian defense, and white goes bishop to c4. So generally, you don't see this at some of the higher levels because the bishop is not necessarily the best piece on c4, especially this early. There are some variations of the open Sicilian where you do see the bishop come to c4, like the dragon and the Sozin, but this early it's pretty rare because I can just go e6 here, and this bishop is already not really looking like the best piece. Knight to c3 is played, pawn to a6. I'm looking to play pawn to b5, expand on the queen side with tempo on this bishop, and now it's already kind of evident that this bishop is kind of not in the best place. I'm looking to play b5, bishop b7, and put my bishop on the long diagonal as well. So pawn to a3 was played. After b5, the bishop tucks itself away on a2. I play bishop to b7, pawn to d3, reinforcing this pawn right here. If you do nothing, b4 could potentially win this pawn on e4. Notice how this knight has to move now, and it is the only piece defending e4 in the game. Instead of pawn to h3, we had pawn to d3, defending e4. I go knight f6, knight f3, and bishop to e7. So the engine doesn't necessarily love this move. Bishop to e7, it wants me to go either d6 or d5 right away, I think. And this is mainly, or knight c6, as a matter of fact. But the main reason is because this does allow this knight to, or this pawn to e5 move, which is not always the best to deal with. I can go knight d5 here, but the engine just slightly doesn't prefer this. Also, it thinks knight g4 is a possibility, but that's just a small nuance in the position. If he wants to go e5, he could. It's not like losing for me or anything, but it's just a little thing to note in the position. Instead, he just castles, and I go d5. Now he goes e5, I go knight d7, and he goes bishop f4. He's looking to overprotect this pawn on e5 because he cannot play pawn to d4 in this case, and this knight is kind of not in the best place. If this knight wasn't on c3, he could look to play like c3 and d4, but unfortunately he can't really build his center very easily, so he's looking to overprotect this pawn on e5 with the bishop. But we're gonna see very soon that that is not necessarily the best way of playing. So I go pawn to d4. He goes knight to e2. If he went knight e4, I was planning on playing bishop takes e4, d takes e4, and then going from there, something like knight c6. I have a pretty reasonable position. My pawn center is very, very good. He's got some double pawns over here. His bishop's kind of staring at a rock right now. So I would have a good position in that case, but instead he goes knight e2, and I go pawn to g5. So this is kind of a drawback of having the bishop on f4. I can look to kick it with g5 since I have not castled yet. I haven't committed my king to castling kingside, so I can look for a kingside pawn rush. Bishop to g3 is played, pawn to h5, pawn to h3, and I play bishop takes f3. So the engine doesn't love this move. It prefers to just develop the knight, but I felt like this was my one opportunity to give him double pawns like this, and if I wait any longer, he might not allow it. I don't think he's going to go knight c1, but it is possible that he does that just to stop me from doubling pawns. So I just jump on the opportunity and do it. G takes f3, knight c6, and then he goes pawn to c3. So he's kind of got a dangerous position here. You can't defend this pawn on e5. I thought maybe he would try pawn to f4, which I think is probably the best way of playing. And in that case, I probably just develop the queen somewhere over here. Maybe I look to play h4. That's also a possibility. I think I could also probably get away with taking here and then taking on f or on e5 if I really want to. Regardless, he didn't play f4. I thought for sure he would. Instead, he looks to just undermine my center right away. But I take with the knight on d7, c takes d4, and the problem with this is I get knight takes f3, king g2, and then I jump in with the other knight. So my knights are really just all up in his grill right now, and I'm currently up 2 pawns, and I just have a great position. I'm looking to play h4 still. My knights are really, really deep in his position, and his pieces are just not very coordinated. The only thing he has going for him is that he has the bishop pair, but he's not going to be able to use them very well in this position. So he goes knight c3. I'm not really sure why. I think maybe he should have just traded the knights. His king is looking really suspect right now, so he should probably look to trade pieces, but he goes knight c3. Maybe he wants to play knight to e4 maybe, but I go pawn to h4, bishop to h2, and I play bishop to d6. So if I can imagine a situation where I get my queen to h2, that's going to be checkmate. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to trade these dark square bishops. And when I play bishop to d6, he really has like 2 options. He can either take on d6, or he can, like, I don't think he's going to play bishop g1. That doesn't seem like a very reasonable move. But, you know, he could maybe consider something like rook h1, but I don't think he's going to play that either. So bishop takes d6 was played, queen takes d6, and now he goes rook h1 because I was threatening checkmate. So I go pawn to g4 here, and I'm just storming ahead. H takes g4, and I go h3. And this is kind of a cool move. If he plays rook takes h3, I can play rook takes h3, and he cannot take back because queen to h2 is checkmate. So after h3, he goes back to f1, and I give a check on h2. So I'm still up a pawn here. I gave one of my pawns back, but I'm kind of dominating in this position. Okay, so he goes king to e1. You could consider taking on h2, but then you kind of have another issue in this position. I'm threatening mate on h1, so you kind of have to go king e1. And then I also have this passed pawn. Don't forget that that's a passed pawn. So, you know, this is really not an easy or fun position to play. So after knight h2, he goes king to e1. I give a check with the other knight. King to e2 is essentially forced. Queen to e5 check. And now he has to play knight e4. That is the only move. And I go pawn to f5. So I'm taking advantage of this pin. So I'm going to be winning a knight here, at the very least. So g takes f5, e takes f5, and he tries rook takes h2. The thing is, this still doesn't really do anything. I could still play knight takes h2 if I want to, but it does introduce some counterplay for him with queen b3. It's not going to be good enough, but I did not play knight takes h2. Instead, I press forward and play f takes e4. So I'm really just trying to blow open his king, and this rook is still hanging, and if he wants to waste a move to save his rook, I will allow him to do that. But he does not have time to try and generate counterplay right now. Queen b3, he's going to get mated here. If king takes f3, something along the lines of probably rook f8, I would think. Rook f8, I guess he has queen f7 check to block at the very least, but if I really want to be precise, I could include c4, make his queen move, and then come and deliver some form of checkmate against this king. This king is far too exposed. And instead, he plays d4. So after f takes e4, he goes d4 to try and keep the e file closed. I take on d4 with the knight with check. Keep in mind his rook is still hanging, so I can take that at any moment if I really want to. He goes king d2. I give a check on f4. He goes to c3, and I castle queenside. So his rook is hanging, and I'm also threatening various mate-related ideas and ideas to win his queen with forms of discovered discover check. So he goes rook h1 in the game to save his rook, and then I go b4 check. And the idea of this is after a takes b4, I go knight b5 check, and I just figured, okay, I'm just gonna go win the queen now. King 2 b3, rook takes d1, rook takes d1, h2. I just throw in that move. It looks like I'm trying to promote the pawn, but I'm really trying to play rook to h3 check, and just go mate him because his king is super exposed. He goes b takes c5, rook h3 check, king to a4. I give a check with e3. That's a discovered check. King to a5. I go queen c7 check. If he plays king takes a6 here, this is going to end poorly. There are a few different ways to try and win this game or win this position. There's queen c6. After queen c6, king a5. There's knight c7. I can go and try and mate him that way. There are really just a number of ideas here. His king is just going to get smoked running up the board. So he tries king b4. I go rook to h4 check, lateral check. He goes king to b3, and after knight d4 check, I mean, I guess he could give up the rook and give up even more material. I'm already up 4 points of material here, but I'm up a queen for a rook, and I've got these pawns ready to promote if I don't somehow mate him. But he goes king c3 and resigns after queen takes c5 check. So if you go to d3, queen to c2 is going to lead to a checkmate, and the only other move is bishop to c4, and there's a variety of moves that win here. Knight e2 is a move, king d3, and then I can take here. It's going to be leading to checkmate. There's no need to take a look at all the lines. Knight b5 also works, but really he's just going to be losing this bishop, and it's going to be pretty devastating. So he just resigns after queen takes c5, but I thought this was a very, very good game. This was a pretty brutal king hunt. So if you see his king on g1 ends up walking all the way across the board, and eventually it gets caught up in a mating attack. But it was a pretty cool game where I kind of took advantage of some of my opponent's opening weaknesses, and it was nice to get a win after last game's tough loss. But hopefully we can keep this going as we move towards 2200, but this was my highest rated win yet and a very, very good game. So hopefully I keep it going, and I will see you guys in the next video.